Your next comic, please give it up for Connie Bryan.
Alright, how's it going, you guys? Good to be back at Blacktop. I'm Connie Bryan. So have you guys noticed in our current tech-obsessed culture, our current social media mania, as I like to call it, that nowadays people don't have a clue anymore what it means to be a friend? Have you noticed this? I mean, if we're going with the Facebook definition, we're really fucked, right? Do you have friends like this that you only hear from them when they have some time to kill when they're driving? Anybody have friends like this? Hey Connie, this is Susie, just got off work. Got that big crosstown commute going on. Thought I'd give you a jingle. Let you know I'm thinking about you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. You know, when this happens, you know you're going to spend the whole time listening to them going on and on about themselves. If you do get a moment toward the end to say anything about yourself, they're always going to go out of their way to let you know when they reach their destination. You know, you could be telling them how your dog just died. It wouldn't matter. You know, they'd be like, can you hold that thought? I'm trying to concentrate on parallel parking at the club now. Translation, wrap it up, we're done. I mean, I'm not kidding. You could be emotionally in tears, you know, asking them for advice. Do you think I should maybe get a puppy? Do you think I should rescue one at the pound? And they'd be like, yeah, listen, whatever. Didn't you hear what I said? I reached my destination. So what do you say we pick this up same time again tomorrow? Bye now. You know, it's like, they're worse than your fake book friends. I call them your car friends. So you know what I've done? I've taken to calling up these car friends when I have some time to kill. Hey Susie, this is Connie, calling you from the bathroom. Yeah, no, you heard me right. I'm on the toilet right now. Damn, I got that bit of a commode commute going on. Thought I'd give you a jingle, let you know I'm thinking about you. Round about the time that they're going on and on again about how this week's boyfriend dumped them, you know, I always like to say, yeah, can you hold that thought? I'm just trying to finish up, you know, hit the flush. And they're like, didn't you hear what I said? My boyfriend dumped me. What should I do? I'm like, no, I heard you. Didn't hear what I said? I reached my destination. But I'm pretty regular, so what do you say we pick this up same time again tomorrow? Bye now. What else? Dating. Let's talk about dating for a second in closing. Dating's tough. I'm holding out for the right guy. That's why it's tough. And people, even some of my relatives, are always giving me shit about that. You say, well, your standards are too high. You need to lower your standards. Right. Why didn't I think of that? I need to lower my standards. And how's that working out for you, Mr. Inbred Einstein Trump supporter? You know, coming off of 3 divorces, all 3 of which were with your first, second, and third cousin. How's that working out for you? I think I'll keep my standards right where they're at. I really don't think they're that high. Can I share them with you guys? I'll share my standards with you. You tell me if they're high. I'm holding out for a guy who's capable of thinking and talking about more than 2 things: sex and sports. Right, ladies? You know, look, I like both of those things. I like sports, I like sex, but I like to talk about more than just that, right? So, and by the way, ladies, have you noticed how guys even like to talk about sex using sports terminology? So, Bob, did you hit the big home run with Connie last night? Did you knock the big grand slam out of the park, dude? Did you stick one in the upper deck, buddy? No, but I made it to second base in the first inning. And that's bullshit, I'm telling you, because I was there and I pitched a no-hitter, and that's hard to do. The truth is, he made it to first base. That's the truth, but that was just a base on balls. Okay? He tried to steal second, and when he tried to steal second, I threw him out. Right? So I gotta say, I think guys are onto something though with this baseball analogy as it relates to dating. I really think it could be helpful. I just think we need to amp it up a little bit more. We need to add managers, umpires, and the instant replay to dating. Wouldn't that be awesome to have a manager with all the game playing and dating? Wouldn't that be great? You know, and an umpire to make the call and an instant replay to prove what he just said when he's trying to lie and say he didn't say it. Wouldn't that be awesome? And this way, when things start heating up and getting out of control, my manager could call timeout and come out of the dugout and approach the mound. Listen, honey, you got to settle down, okay? You're all over the place, okay? What are you trying to do? You trying to give him the game? Is that it? You're trying to just give him? You're throwing way too many pitches and way too many base on balls, okay? And another thing, why you always got to be throwing in that damn screwball? Alright? Can't you see he's crowding your pussy? You got to mix it up once in a while, throw his ass a curveball, and brush his ass back. And then when he does try try to steal second, the umpire would be right there to make the call. You're out! After which, of course, his manager would come screaming out of his dugout, right? Kicking sand all over the umpire's feet. And then what would they have to do? They'd consult the instant replay, right? To prove it, which would show, admittedly, I had unzipped his fly, true. And he had unsnapped my bra, true. But it would clearly show that I threw him out before his lips ever locked on my nipple. Thank you very much.
Good shit.
Okay, here we go. Take a look at this one other story I wanted to share with you out of the Associated Press entitled Jimmy Carter Returns to Teach Sunday School. Former U.S. President Jimmy Carter is back to teaching Sunday school in Georgia after taking time off to undergo surgery for a broken hip. We're so glad he's better and recovering. Carter told attendees at the Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains, Georgia that he and his wife Rosalind have nursing care at home and they're doing fine. He's so excited to be able to get out of the house again and teach little children scary stories about God. Do you remember Sunday school? Do you guys remember Sunday school? I think Sunday school, you remember the 6 stories they used to teach us as little children? I think Sunday school had to be where Stephen King got his early inspiration, for his scary novels. Can you imagine what it must have been like for Stephen King's kids growing up at bedtime? All right, kids, tonight Daddy's gonna read you the first chapter of his new novel, Pet Sematary. Daddy, Pet Sematary? Does that mean our pet kitty is gonna die? Yes, sweetie, of course, but don't worry, that's when all the fun begins. Because God condemns him to hell because you were so bad. He condemns your kitty to hell as a sacrifice because you were so bad, but he comes back as a demon kitty. Do you remember these scary stories that they taught us in Sunday school as children? I always wondered why do they teach this stuff to little kids? And then one day it dawned on me, because if you try to teach this shit to a fully grown adult for the first time, they're gonna laugh you out of the room for the 5150 whack job you clearly are. Do you remember, like the most popular one, the one that most of us remember as kids, of course, the story of Abraham and little Isaac? Remember, of course, what is Abraham? He hears the voice of God commanding him to what? To sacrifice his son, to kill his son on the altar. And of course, what a lot of people don't know is that story was mistranslated. Would you guys like to hear the correct translation? Because if you're going to teach this shit to children, shouldn't they at least hear the correct translation? I think so. So let's hold our own little Sunday school class right here for a second. How about that? I'm going to share with you I'm going to tell you the real story, the correct translation. So yes, it's true, Abraham, Father Abraham, what he hears is the voice of God commanding him to sacrifice little Isaac. So he invites little Isaac to go for a walk with him up to the top of the mountain. What little boy doesn't want to go for a walk with his daddy? The one person in the whole wide world he knows he can trust to keep him safe and protect him. If little Isaac had had any idea what was in store for him when they finished their walk to the top of the mountain, I'm sure he would have been more like, no thanks, Dad, knock yourself out. You go on up to the top of the mountain and fuck a sheep or whatever it is you do up there. I think I'm going to stay home and play World of Jewish Warcraft with my friends. But no, little Isaac had no clue, so of course he wanted to go for a walk with his dad. And of course, yes, they get to the top of the mountain, and what happens? Abraham grabs little Isaac, binds him with cord, puts him on an altar, takes out this giant knife, and he's about to plunge it into little Isaac's chest. I just have a question for you. Did the Jews really have this much trouble getting their kids to do their chores? So he's about to drive this big knife into little Isaac's chest, and of course, what happens in the story? The angel of the Lord shows up at the last possible second. But keep in mind, even way back then, these were Jewish Hollywood script writers. So it's all about maximum dramatic effect and waiting till the last second. The angel shows up and he grabs Abraham's hand and stops him as he's just starting to plunge the knife into little Isaac's chest. And Abraham is pissed. And he says, "What the shiksta? I distinctly heard the voice of God commanding me
to sacrifice my son. And the angel said, no, you didn't, you deaf old man. Clean the wax out. He wasn't telling you to sacrifice him. He was telling you to circumcise him. All right, stick around. Like I said, we got a great interview coming up with author and international public speaker David Fitzgerald. You don't want to miss it, so please, no channel surfing. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Connie Bryan, and you're watching The Connie Bryan Show. And I have a rock star of an author with me right here in my studio. I'm so excited to have David Fitzgerald on the show with me. The author of a book called Nailed 10 Christian Myths That Show Jesus Never Existed at All.
No hyperbole.
So everybody don't freak out if you're Christians out there. I want you to stay tuned because, David, as I understand it, you used to be a Christian. You're not just somebody who's an atheist and has always had a problem with it.
Right. No, I was super Christian all the way through my growing up. Southern Baptist.
Me too.
Yeah. So the one true faith, Southern Baptist.
And it's when you do a little bit of homework, you find out it turns out that all the stuff you're being told as a kid that you have to believe is a fraud. It's not based on fact.
It's true, it's true, and it's drained in us, ingrained in us from the get-go. Oh, defend the truth, defend God's word, defend, what's right. And when you realize one day by one means or another that what you're being told might not be right.
No.
Sometimes it's not true at all.
And you wrote the book 10, it says 10, right? 10 Christian myths, but
right.
We might not have time to get to all of them, but can we go through some of the highlights
right.
of those fraudulent
right.
examples you discovered?
Absolutely. And I want to make it very clear that I was a perfectly happy atheist for 16 years before it even crossed my mind that there might not be a Jesus. I mean, it just says, of course there's a Jesus.
Okay, so when you became an atheist, you were still holding on to that probably was a Jesus.
Yeah, it's like it never even occurred to me to question it.
And
why would we, And
why did you change?
Well, here's the funny thing. What made me change my mind about that was when I realized, if you read this gospel, Jesus is like this. This gospel is like this. I wonder what the real Jesus was like. And ironically, once you start looking for what the real Jesus is and find out the state of our evidence for Jesus, I say in the book, once you start pulling on that thread, pretty soon you have no sweat.
You have nothing. By the way, you mentioned the Gospels. We would be remiss if we didn't probably start out right away by reminding everybody, maybe a lot of Christians don't know this.
Yeah.
It was a shock to me when I found out because pastors don't tell you this.
Yeah.
And that is that the Gospels were not written by the names that are on them. So Matthew,
right.
Mark, Luke, and John.
Right. All
were
these
not
friends
written
and
by,
family of Jesus. Yeah, that's not true.
They were not written by Matthew, Mark, Luke,
In
and
the
John.
2nd century, we had tons of Acts, epistles, Gospels, all written under all different names. And it was this arms race to see, you're got the Gospel of Mark. Well, our Gospel is from John, and our Gospel is from the beloved disciple who we like the best. And all those names got attached later in this race to see who could be the best. And
did you discover also that kind of led you, as it has with me, it led you to understanding the lie of Christianity because it was ripped off from many myths that were common myths long before? In other words, the virgin birth is not unique to Christianity. Right. It was co-opted from many other...
and not even across the board. Mark doesn't mention it. John doesn't mention it. Only 2 of them do.
Yeah.
And that was another crazy thing is I quickly found out that all our biographical information for Jesus comes from those 4 books.
That's it. No historians. And
there's no corroboration for anything.
And there were so many historians at the time.
And there were so many loser wannabe messiahs at the time that we know so much more about.
That were documented by those historians at the time.
And yet these losers all did something that the real Jesus couldn't do.
So you had Jesus healing the sick, raising the dead, making blind people see, walking on the water.
You've got earthquakes in Jerusalem. You've got lightning, angels. You've got the dead walking out of their graves in downtown Jerusalem and appearing to many.
That Jesus raised, like Lazarus.
Exactly.
And not one historian has documented any of this. However, the historians document many other...
They notice all these other boring things that happened at the same time.
People who claim to be messiahs.
But somehow they miss all that.
But they missed the one that was making all these miracles happen. Because it really didn't happen.
Because it really didn't happen. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And once you start looking into what our evidence is for the Bible, it's astounding when you realize that our New Testament, that's supposedly letters from the earliest Christians, well, half of them are frauds, complete frauds, in that there
You're talking about Paul?
forgery. I'm talking about half of Paul.
Half of Paul's writings, right, have been
are
determined
complete,
to be a fraud.
There's all
Not-
there's the Deuteropaulines, the Pseudo-Paulines,
Yeah.
that they're clearly written after his death, or they're clearly written in opposition to what he says in other letters.
Yeah.
And even his generally accepted letters, the six that are accepted as general, contain problems that show that they're a mashup of several letters, and they've been re-edited, and things have been added to and taken away from. So it gets very problematic, and there's so many things that are wrong with what we think of as Christianity.
Okay.
Whether Christianity is true or not, these things about the Bible and about the New Testament aren't true. And Christians believe so many of them, and it's kind of like a tennis game. It's like, well, I believe this because of this, and we know that's true because of, it says in the Bible,
Yeah.
And there's no evidence. It's just these assertions being bounced back and forth between each other.
And then
And we say, because the eyewitnesses wrote the Gospels. Well, no, they didn't. Well, we know it's true because there's so many witnesses outside the Bible.
yeah.
No,
So
they're
let's
not.
talk about again. That's the point about how Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the eyewitnesses.
Yes.
That Christians think wrote. No,
Yeah.
it's a known fact that they didn't write.
It's a
those
known
books.
fact, and biblical
And nobody knows
historians-
who wrote them.
Nobody knows who wrote them, exactly. We only have guesses on who wrote one of them. Luke, when he writes his gospel, he starts off by saying, there's so many people writing gospels right now,
Yeah.
it seemed to me to be a good idea to go investigate the story and give you the real deal, as it was handed down to
Yeah.
our generation, generations later. That's how he starts his gospel. And then he goes and copies most of his gospel from Matthew and Mark,
From them.
without ever mentioning them as his sources.
And one of the big points that I wanted to touch on is the reason why this Savior God-man is being held onto in the Jesus context is because the Savior God-man myth was such a common, right? That was such a common myth through many, many cultures that predate Christianity by maybe 1,000 years
For sure.
or more.
I mean, it's just tracing the evolution of Judaism and the evolution of Christianity and the evolution of the Jesus story. All these storylines,
They were meant to be metaphorical.
they were meant to be metaphorical, and very quickly they realized the benefit of, well, we know it's really about this, but we'll just tell the story and let it ride as it is.
And then people started twisting and making it literal when it was meant to be a metaphor.
Right.
A mythical metaphor.
Right. And so much Christianity was around for generations before anyone even thought the idea of writing this gospel story as an allegory.
Christianity existed and you were telling me
all these
off
different
camera
forms.
in our pre-interview that it was like many different forms.
Many
of it.
different forms that we wouldn't even recognize as Christianity.
Before-
that couldn't even agree on the number of gods that there were, or that people could be raised from the dead, or that dying for sins had anything to do with Jesus being our
In the
Savior.
early form, that had nothing to do with it, right?
Right.
And then later it became that there had to be a blood sacrifice that God...
Yeah.
Stop and think about that, you
Yeah.
guys, all right? You're told you have to believe this, so you just believe it. Stop and think about it. You really believe in a God that has to have a bloodlust satisfied? A human sacrifice?
Yeah.
You thought... Come on, you thought that was devil worship, but it's the fundamental...
Yeah,
teaching
like
of Christianity.
Aslan says in Chronicles of Narnia, it's the deep magic. It's like, well, where does that come from, They act as though God doesn't have any choice but to torture porn his own son as a sacrifice for us.
Yeah, and that's a
Which
sick,
means,
man-made,
not only is
it's
it
a
sick,
man-made sick concept.
It is, and it's very sick, but the thing is, it doesn't make any damn sense. It's like, so you're saying we have the power to forgive each other.
Thank you.
If
Yes.
Connie blasphemes against me, you know what? I might not hold against her.
You might forgive me.
Oh, that's Connie. I can't stay mad at you.
Yes.
But God is such a big asshole that he can't do
He can't forgive. Has to have vengeance.
That's
That's not a loving God.
That's not love at all. That's a jealous, petty, Old Testament,
Right.
Mesopotamian,
And
bloodthirsty God.
Exactly, and then you're going to add to that all through the Old Testament, God needed animals to be killed, their blood
Exactly.
shed to satisfy God's bloodlust.
It has
Just
to
from
be
that,
done.
you can see that that's a man-made, sick
What did he do before the blood?
portrayal.
What did he do before blood?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny and it's not just Christianity. I don't want you to think we're just picking on Christianity, because
Yes, thank you. For
all the
saying
other religions are just
They're all-
as screwed up, and their evolution shares all the same flaws that Christianity
Yeah, the
does.
big three, as I like
The
to
big
call
three,
them,
yeah.
which is Christianity, Islam, and Judaism.
Yeah. And yeah, they're one long line that goes back to Mesopotamia and Zoroaster and
they all
Babylonian and
come-
Egypt and all these other cultures that influence each other.
And they ripped off all these popular myths that were meant to be a metaphor, and what I want to add to that is it was meant to be a metaphor that we are what God is. We are all a part of what you might want to call divine. All of us, it was meant to be a metaphor. All these myths of the Savior God-man, as I understand it from the reading I've done about all these myths that were co-opted by Christianity because they were popular.
Sure.
They were popular ideas.
And to be fair,
ahead.
I mean, those ideas change through time, and those
Yeah.
religious ideas evolved.
So we're not trying to shoot down spirituality here is my point.
Oh yeah,
And then
but by the same token, there's not necessarily a one true religion behind all these religions.
Yeah.
Or at least I don't
Right.
think so.
Just-
We're all human beings trying to make sense of this universe.
Just
we
that
live
there's
in.
no condemnation. If there's any one true understanding, it's not that there's one dogma, but just however you want to approach things spiritual, as long as it's not a condemning one, and as long as it's one that understands we're all
Right.
unified as a
Right.
part of what we want to call the divine, the universe. We're a part of that energy.
Sure, we're all
Right?
a part of that universe, and I think that's something we were talking about earlier. For all the problems I have with Eastern religions as well, one thing that they tend to do better is this idea that we're not chasing after this thing outside of ourselves. We're talking about making ourselves part of this universe.
Waking up to the
Waking
fact
up
that
to
we
that.
are.
Yeah.
We're connected to it.
And as a big old atheist who has no room in my life for most religion, I can totally get behind that
You
idea.
can get behind that. Even as I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Because I really felt that might be the case, that an atheist might not want to use the term God, but can
There's so
understand.
much baggage to things like spirituality and that. But
Yeah,
exactly.
but
when you talk about
A
our
collective energy.
interconnectedness,
Yes, our
the fact
conscious-
that we are all human beings that evolved out of this universe, that we're part of this universe, and the universe is part of us,
We're co-creators. We
We're
are co-creators.
yeah.
So if you think of God as a creator, we're not here shooting that down. We're saying that we are all co-creators, and we make all of us, the universe and us, make up what you could call God.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think that's a much better
We're not
explanation to me.
separate
because
from
we're not separate from it. Yeah,
And that's the big lie of organized religion that makes this conversation so important.
Sure. And the fact that we have love for each other
Yes.
and means there is love in the universe because we are creating it.
And like you said a while ago, with your love, you can forgive. You wouldn't
Exactly.
want to condemn somebody because they
Exactly.
got something wrong. Wouldn't you want to let them
Honestly,
learn and wake
just,
up?
You just read the Bible. Is there a single thing God does in the entire Old Testament that doesn't sound like some crabby ass asshole? There's not one thing he does the whole time that makes you go, oh, thanks God. Unless you count maybe creating the universe that he probably needs to kill off by a flood. I mean, again, we're so stretched for time because we could
Yeah, we
spend
got about 2
all
minutes
night
left.
talking about every single one of these rabbit holes we've just touched on. And I hope we do get a chance to do that.
I'd love to do it again with you because it's just the most important topic because, real quickly, it's what stands in the way of world peace. Religion, organized religion, has done nothing but cause division and cause more wars and violence.
Yeah.
If we can teach people that, no, spirituality is something different and that it's a collective, all-encompassing oneness that you were meant to understand, religion has done nothing but cause division. And that's why this is so important to get to a point we can have world peace.
Yeah, and if nothing else, we can make the world a better place in our own life, in our own neighborhood, just by not forgetting that we are all human, we're all fallible, we all are connected to each other. We can't do it by ourselves.
And we need
can't do
each
it alone.
other.
We need each other. Yeah.
Value one another, and you wouldn't want somebody looking at you as condemned. You know that that's wrong. So why would you embrace a belief that condemns, that says others who aren't believing like you? Or it's like, we've got to get past that. That's the next step in the human
Yeah, I think so.
experience.
And it always cracks me up how Christians are quick to say, "Oh, that's really devil worship." Oh no, that's Satan. Why is it so easy to worship Satan and so hard to worship God? It's like, how come he can't get his act together? Yeah. Why are we calling him a he anyway? Does he have a penis?
Why
If
call
not,
him a he?
what? Yeah, exactly.
Because God would be male and female.
Spirit, or neither, or both, or you
Right,
know,
if we're in His image, right?
it just
in God's image,
no
not His
matter
image.
how you slice it, it doesn't add up.
Right.
You know.
Well, it's been fantastic having you, David. We're out of time.
Thanks so
We're going to
much.
have to do it again.
I guess so.
And thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show. I know people are going to really love looking into some of the books you've written. And thank you for watching, everybody. This is the Connie Bryan Show. We'll see you next time.
Dating's tough. I'm holding out for the right guy, that's why it's tough. And people, even some of my relatives are always giving me shit about that. You know, say, well, your standards are too high. You need to lower your standards. Right. Why didn't I think of that? I need to lower my standards. And how's that working out for you, Mr. Inbred Einstein, Trump supporter? You know, coming off of 3 divorces, all 3 of which were with your first, second, and third cousin? How's that working out for you? I think I'll keep my standards right where they're at. I really don't think they're that high. Can I share them with you guys? I'll share my standards with you. You tell me if they're high. I'm holding out for a guy who's capable of thinking and talking about more than 2 things: sex and sports. Right, ladies? You know, look, I like both of those things. I like sports, I like sex, but I like to talk about more than just that, right? So, and by the way, ladies, have you noticed how guys even like to talk about sex using sports terminology? So, Bob, did you hit the big home run with Connie last night? Did you knock the big grand slam out of the park, dude? Did you stick one in the upper deck, buddy? No, but I made it to second base in the first inning. And that's bullshit, I'm telling you, because I was there and I pitched a no-hitter, and that's hard to do. The truth is, he made it to first base. That's the truth, but that was just a base on balls. He tried to steal second, and when he tried to steal second, I threw him out. Right? So I gotta say, I think guys are onto something though with this baseball analogy as it relates to dating. I really think it could be helpful. I just think we need to amp it up a little bit more. We need to add managers, umpires, and the instant replay to dating. Wouldn't that be awesome to have a manager with all the fucking game playing and dating? Wouldn't that be great? You know, and an umpire to make the call, and an instant replay to prove what he just said when he's trying to lie and say he didn't say it. Wouldn't that be awesome? And this way, when things start heating up and getting out of control, my manager could call timeout and come out of the dugout and approach the mound. Listen, honey, you got to settle down, okay? You're all over the place, okay? What are you trying to do? You trying to give him the game? Is that it? You're trying to just give him? You're throwing way too many pitches and way too many base on balls, okay? And another thing, why you always got to be throwing him that damn screwball? Alright? Can't you see he's crowding your pussy? You got to mix it up once in a while, throw his ass a curveball, and brush his ass back. And then when he does try to steal second, the umpire would be right there to make the call. You're out! After which, of course, his manager would come screaming out of his dugout, right? Kicking sand all over the umpire's feet. And then what would they have to do? They'd consult the instant replay, right? To prove it, which would show, admittedly, I had unzipped his fly, true, and he had unsnapped my bra, true, but it would clearly show that I threw him out before his lips ever locked on my nipple. Thank you very much.
Good shit.